Hello, everyone. It's Michael Jacob with Unleashing Intuition Secrets. Join once again Leo Zagami, the Confessions of an Illuminati best-selling author. It's got 12 books in the Illuminati series, and we're probably going to be discussing the 12th and a little bit of in detail here. So, Leo, thanks for joining us once again.
It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure because this world there's always something very interesting happening. Also, maybe related possibly to my books. As you know, Volume 12 is the last installment of Confessions, and is also the one where I talked about the future Pope, the climate change agenda that the Jesuits have constructed since the end of the 60s, and many other interesting topics like the relation between the Jesuits and China, the creation of the European Union and the Bilderberg Club. And like I said, it's definitely reaching the top of the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. And at the moment, this new Pope is finally coming out of the closet because he was kind of portrayed initially as a conservative for some people who didn't really have a clear idea of it. But you remember, I said it from the very start.
Yeah, Pope, you said what blew me away, and my audience ate it up. It was like one of my best viewing shows I've ever done. Where you talked about the Jesuits and how they're the most powerful force as blow away everybody as far as their control. And I've been reading that book, and the first chapter alone basically shows you how they're dark. Loyola, the guy that started it, really started going down a dark road, and I think that set the pace for the Jesuits. They're all very dark, I believe.
Well, there is really two forces at work in today's world. The Jesuits, of course, is in charge mostly of the spiritual realm, and then you have the banking cartel, which is the Sabbatean Frankist force within Judaism, the heresy that was created by Shabbatai and Jacob Frank. But if you think about it, both of these forces have a common origin, because apart from the fact they have always collaborated with each other, but they both come from those marranos, those Spanish Portuguese Jews who pretended to become Catholic, but in reality they had retained their own Jewish faith in an unorthodox way. And Ignazio Loyola was claimed to be one of them, but definitely his personal secretary was one of them. And so it's like this combination of these two forces, the heresy within the Catholic world and Christianity, and the heresy within what we have with the Jews. And of course, the Jews have Judaism, respecting Mosaic laws. The moment in which they go out of those Mosaic laws, or those Sinaic laws, which Moses gave to them after receiving them from God, then they are no longer to be respected as the chosen people. In any case, we have today a world in turmoil, and a Pope who blesses a block of ice. So, that is pretty shocking.
Absolutely. And your latest article on your website was leozagami.com, where you talked about that. So here we have the Pope blessing we'll play a little clip here, blessing the block of ice, because it's all about climate change, and these knuckleheads are pushing this hard.
Yeah, you see, they really believe that they can brainwash millions of people in accepting the lies of climate change. And this happens to be a celebration by Pope Leo XIV of an event. It's 10 years since in May 2015, like I explained also in Volume 12 of my Confessions, there was a new encyclica, which is basically a document that the Pope issues dedicated to climate change, called Laudato Si. For the 10-year anniversary, the Pope has decided last week to invite a bunch of people. Amongst them, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger was probably one of the most prominent figures but there was also a bunch of other politicians, globalists of all kinds and sorts. And for a couple of days in the residency of Castel Gandolfo, which we have already discussed when it came to the first Green Mass that the Pope somehow put together in the month of July, and then he had even Zelensky coming to visit him. But the incredible thing was to see Arnold Schwarzenegger being nowadays a full-time Jesuit agent, because it's not so much about being a rhino, it's about being a Jesuit agent. Think about, for example, the Jesuit fifth class Jesuit, like I describe in my book, is somebody who maybe went to a Jesuit school, maybe somehow was connected to a Jesuit, but decided rather than joining the order and taking the 3 vows or the 4 vows, to stay maybe in politics or following another career outside of the order, and then taking what is known as the 5th vow. Now, that is completely secret. Nobody knows about that. But Schwarzenegger has been very much involved in promoting the activities of the Catholic Church in recent years, even if he doesn't really believe in the basic tenets of it. I mean, he openly said, he publicly said that he doesn't believe, for example, a heaven exists. I mean, if you don't believe a heaven exists, that is, I think, the most basic things for all people of Christian faith. Right. So that gives you an idea that it's all about propaganda, it's all about appearing rather than being. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, we have seen him here in America with Greta Thunberg, who recently was arrested and deported back to Sweden after being part of this freedom flotilla of boats that left from various parts of Europe that wanted to reach Gaza. Now, there is people who say, oh, poor Greta, she was treated badly in the Israeli jail and this and that. I mean, all these people like Greta, who are actually from a rich background, she's not from a working class family, they do these fake revolutionary acts, knowing very well that some powerful lawyer will eventually get them out of trouble. So Greta Thunberg and Arnold Schwarzenegger, when I saw them together, I realized that Arnold Schwarzenegger was not only a rhino, he was much more than a rhino.
Wow, yeah. Climate change guy. Wow, how about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He has completely embraced this whole thing of climate change. But like I explained in my book, which you have read, this whole climate change agenda was born at the end of the 60s with a particular black pope called Padre Pedro Arrupe, the black pope back then, until the early 80s. And he actually got so progressive, and so he was such a Marxist that at one point he clashed with John Paul II, because John Paul II came from, from a Polish background of communists persecuting Catholics and persecuting Christians. And when he saw that the Jesuits with Padre Arrupe was going too further to the left, he actually issued a formal investigation into the Jesuit order. So this happened in the early 80s, and it was a big thing. Then, of course, we had the various successors. Hans Kobenbach, in particular, worked also for getting further with this climate agenda issue. And you can find actually very easily, if you go on Google, the Eco-Jesuit. It's a project which emanates from everything we have just discussed in regards to the Jesuits, who are the real instigators of the political climate change agenda. I mean, if you went to a politician in the 60s or 70s and talk to them about climate change, they were, they were laughed in your face. They would have known nothing about it. If you remember, it was the first one to really bring this attention to the mass. This to the attention of the mass was Al Gore, not to a certain extent, but it was in reality behind the scenes the Jesuits who really tried to push the lie of climate change, because let's discuss it in detail. What does it mean, climate change for them? It means that in the future, they will be able to reimagine the state and work in what Tony Blair's Institute has depicted as a blueprint for a global techno-dictatorship in which you can, and I'm talking here, what you're showing now is the most recent Black Pope, the one who is presently in charge of the order, Father Sosa, who is another communist from Venezuela, out of all places. So, I mean,
wow.
It's going to be a little bit weird to see what's going to happen if we enter in an open war with Venezuela, as it seems like. When
the Jesuits first were activated by the Pope, was the leader of the Jesuits, was that when they got the moniker of Black Pope?
Okay, what happens is this. Let's go back at the beginning of the history of the Jesuits. We are basically in 1540 when the order eventually will be approved and sanctioned as an official order of the Catholic Church. In the early 1540s, they start their mission. Previously, they were actually judged as heretics because the way that Ignazio Loyola, the founder, he was connected to the Alumbrados. The Alumbrados were the Illuminati of the time, who were practicing Gnosticism, Islamic mysticism, the Kabbalah.
Yeah.
So he was arrested more than once by the Inquisition. He was investigated.
Inquisition, yeah.
Yeah, the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, not any Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. The ultimate Inquisition, the one that Monty Python always depicts in their parodies. The Spanish Inquisition is the one that goes after him. But what happens is that because he writes these spiritual exercises after having some kind of mystical revelation in front of the Holy Mary of Montserrat, which is a beautiful place outside.
Oh, yeah, that's incredible. You spent some time there, didn't you?
Yes, I spent some time there when I was very young.
Wow.
It was a fantastic place to go and visit, but also you can really breathe the spiritual appeal that maybe draw him to do what he did after. Because at that point, what happened is he wasn't a priest. So he couldn't really practice the things that a priest can practice. And so the Inquisition said, you need to tame it down. You need to just, And so he escaped and went to France. In France, with other friends of his, he established the nucleus around 1530. They went and established in the middle of August the original nucleus of the Jesuit order, the Company of Jesus. But it took them many years to actually have the papal approval. And it took all these years because it was only because the Pope, at one point, the Pope was in difficulty. He was having problems with the Church of England. He was having problems with Martin Luther. He was having problems with the Reformation. He was having problems with the church, which was becoming fragmented, which was trying to break up from Rome. I mean, what happened with the beginning of the Church of England was particularly bad for Rome. And so he said, how I'm going to fight them? How I'm going to fight these forces? And he saw that what Ignazio Loyola was proposing was not an ordinary order. And he also saw that the people Ignazio Loyola and what they were doing with the Jesuits could actually benefit them, because the Jesuits knew exactly what witchcraft, what black magic, what occultism was, what all these practices. So he said
the dark side. That's crazy.
It was really like embracing the dark side, but also to control the dark side, because the Dominicans, the Dominican order, had been in charge of the Inquisition up until then. And the Dominicans, they didn't have a military kind of regimented appeal to do what was necessitated to fight the Reformation with the Counter-Reformation. This is a pivotal moment in the history of the Catholic Church, a moment maybe of weakness, we can say. Wow. And so at that point, like you said, let's embrace the dark side. You know, when you have the guy in England, Henry VIII, who suddenly has a bunch of marriages and breaks from Rome, when you have people like Martin Luther coming to Rome and saying, well, this is like degenerated, this church is in decline. But at the same time, the Pope himself was being accused of having pagan sympathies, because all these, you know, all these popes, they came from the black nobility of Rome, which were ancient families that were practicing paganism, that knew certain
great explanation. Yeah, no? Tying it all together. Wow, fantastic.
So in the end, the best solution for the papacy was simply to embrace the Jesuits and let them loose upon the Protestant, newly born Protestant world. That happened a very short time. I mean, 20 years after the foundation, the Pope decided that the Jesuits were good enough to head his intelligence unit, his first intelligence unit and secret service, also to protect the Pope from eventual poison and stuff, but also to infiltrate, because the Jesuits offered the Pope a new thing. The Ignazio Loyola, when he went with the constitutions of his new order, he had 4 vows. He said, my ordinary Jesuits have 3 vows. Then we have the really dedicated one that have 4 vows. And the 4th vow is of complete and blind obedience, not to Christianity, but to the Pope.
Right. Wow.
And the Pope, when he saw that, he was like, they're going to do anything. They're going to murder for me. That means a license to kill.
Yeah.
The Pope knew that the Catholic Church had been weakened by the Knights Templars not being any longer there. The military, the Knights Templar represented a military order, and that was lacking.
They destroyed themselves by going after the Knights Templar and Jacques Molay and burning at the stake. Then they ran to Scotland, and that was
ran to Scotland. Of course, then they had the protection of Robert the Bruce, some of them. Others.
And then they started kicking, and Scotland then started kicking butt. So,
yeah, absolutely. But
Knights
also,
Templar were there. Yeah.
But the Knights Templar also merged with other orders in Portugal and other parts where they were also present, maybe not as publicly as they were in Scotland. In Scotland, they became, and he was actually one of my ancestors who was from the Lion family, who I've mentioned in volume 12, who was a marshal of the Knights Templars, who went to Robert the Bruce, and then their families became involved with each other, and actually they married with each other, and so from that descends then the Lion family of the Queen Mother of England also, which official castle is in Glamis in Scotland.
Wow, so, I didn't know that it came all the way from Robert the Bruce, that time frame. That's pretty impressive. Yeah, yes,
wow. Absolutely. And so what happens is that at that point, England also was, let's say, having problems, though, because their war later on waged against the Vatican needed a form of intelligence and of a secret service. This, of course, a couple of centuries after the Templars' demise, so later on, with Queen Elizabeth, That's when John Dee became 007. That's when they unleashed the first form of British intelligence, which is a precursor to the model for James Bond. I mean, James Bond is itself a name that refers to the Masonic symbols, Joachim and Roberts, James Bond. But it's like also in regards to Freemasonry. Freemasonry comes partly from Scotland because those Templars got involved with the Scottish aristocracy and spearheaded the very early forms of Freemasonry. In this inaugurating the first lodge, Eredom of Kilwinning. Now, I will say that aside from all this, the Jesuits understood that the Templars had been a force that they could imitate, but they didn't want to be a military order. So when they established their order, they have a general. The Jesuits have a general, and that's one of the few orders. Now you have a general, it's very military. The approach is military. But they don't have, like the Knights Templars were warrior monks. They were going around with the swords. They were visibly military. The Jesuits could be more in disguise. The Jesuits started to practice the art of disguise, of dressing up like the locals. You will find them dressed up as Muslims in Muslim countries. You will find them dressed up as a Protestant. They will have to adapt to the local people to not generate, because their work, especially for the Jesuits of the Fourth Vow, became of infiltrating and trying to instigate a revolution against the Church of England. Guy Fawkes Day, that was a Jesuit product.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's like they really were at the basis. Now, in regards to Freemasonry, of course, followed up, matured, but then Freemasonry eventually also got under the, any organization from the Rosicrucians to the Freemasons, once they started to have success, they will be infiltrated and manipulated by the Jesuits. And so that's why I wanted to write this book as the last book of my installment, because they are the ones who control the whole system. Now, Pope Leo is a pope, an Augustinian pope, from an Augustinian order. Now, Martin Luther was from the same order as Pope Leo. And he was placed there, so he almost like a way for the Augustinian order to pay the penitence for what happened hundreds of years ago and bring back all those churches. And now we see, just the other day, the Church of England has nominated the first woman Archbishop of Canterbury. Have you seen that?
No. Wow.
She is not only a woman, but she's a feminist, and she's a pro-abortionist. So the Church of England is going full woke. I mean, it's like a nightmare, because we have seen millions of people marching with Tommy Robinson against the Islamic threat, and we expect some kind of Christian, revival. But you can't have a Christian revival if your own church is made up of this kind of people who are in bed with the one world religion, because that's what Prince Charles is, one of the biggest globalists at the moment. And, people at the moment also have seen what's happening with Gaza, and they know that maybe you will have Tony Blair's involvement. And people ask me, Leo, how come Tony Blair? I mean, we thought he was not, he was not around any longer. What is Tony Blair doing in the international arena? This is the new Archbishop of Canterbury. And I mean, it's just scandalous, because apart from the fact, it's not a question of being a woman or being a man, but it's a question of being a woman who is for abortion and for feminism, which are really values that contradict the basic tenets of Christianity. So I think that, and she takes her marching orders like the past Archbishop of Canterbury from the Pope in Rome. I mean, there's no longer the Church of England being independent from Rome. There is no Christian denomination in the world, aside from maybe the Orthodox Church of Kirill, like I explained in Volume 7, who is outside of the unification of Christians, which is being put together by the Jesuits. Wow. So I think that it was good to show that, but it would be also good to discuss the involvement of Tony Blair with Gaza, because we go from, people don't know maybe this, but I've been following, of course, the New World Order for a long time. I was involved in it. And with Tony Blair, I always said he was an agent of the Vatican when he was a prime minister. But it became obvious because the day after he left his office as prime minister, he became a Catholic. He made it obvious.
Wow.
He kind of like really openly made it obvious. And he is following the lead of the Fabian Society, which has always been instigating. I don't know if you know about the Fabian Society, but they are really the first British think tank that was established at the end of the 19th century. And Tony Blair's Institute for Global Change is reimagining the state in a way that those green policies which the Pope is trying to promote with the blessing of the ice are also connected to Tony Blair. Because what Tony Blair is doing now, he's arguing for the digital transformation of an imaginary or a reimagined state. In his case, of course, the United Kingdom, but it can be any state. They want to actually use Gaza as an experiment ground for this modern digital infrastructure. And what does it mean? It means, like, for example, policies like the Green New Deal were being enforced digitally by cutting off electricity or water once monthly limits are exceeded. If you exceed, you have your water or electricity cut off. Not only that, they want to create like a credit score system. So, for example, if you exceed, you will have your own flights canceled because they will say that you have already generated enough pollution for the month and you can't take a flight. Mm-hmm. So you will be forced to deal with so Blair has described this as a little work of persuasion towards modernization. But it is basically the normalization of a massive surveillance police state. And in all this, we have Peter Thiel, who talks about the Antichrist. With him, he's one of the protagonists with Palantir. So, I mean, everybody here is really not being honest with the people who, of course, are pushed towards a diabolic scheme, which, as you know, I've already discussed years ago in Volume 7 of my Confessions. And this book is another book which I know you have read. But the thing is, the ideological roots of Blair's vision are to be traced in Anthony Giddens' book, which came out in 1998, called The Third Way, which advocates for this technocratic transformation of socialism. So the problem here is we have a Pope who is blessing a block of ice. We have Schwarzenegger who is there doing his propaganda stunt. Then we have on the other side another Catholic like Tony Blair, who is also a Jesuit agent of the fifth class Jesuit agent. Because and he showed that when he, like I said previously, became a Catholic just after the day after, I think, he left the office in Downing Street. So that was pretty obvious. What's going to happen with Gaza? You know, I've written a book, volume 10 of my Confessions, about the eternal conflict in the Middle East. And of course, they might now reach a deal in Cairo tomorrow night. That's what's apparently going to happen. But like I explained in volume 10, it always happens in Cairo because that's the home of the Cairo Lodge, which controls the Middle East for the Illuminati.
Wow.
So we're going to have maybe a normalization that is required maybe at the moment for them, so they can then start an experiment in Gaza, which of course will be under the control of Tony Blair's technocratic vision. And Blair described himself as a follower of the ideas of Giddens. And he is, I mean, we can say one thing about what is happening here. This is, to say the least, despotism of the worst kind, because they think that they have fooled people in a way that we're going to believe them. We're going to believe our masters. So it's very sad to see, though, that the ignorance that unfortunately they've been able to push and the backing of powerful globalist partners like, the UN, the Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, they are ready to implement the next level control system in this world. And they want to do it for 2030, like I always said.
So do you think we'll be able to educate people and push back on that?
The only opportunity that we have is to convince enough people to break up and create an independent state that will not embrace that kind of technology. Remember, though, that this technology is very insidious, because even the creators of AI are saying that once the genie is out of the bottle, they can't control it. But that's why we need to promote the idea of a society without AI in the control rooms, because what they are promoting is to have the AI present in the control rooms of power, being political, being religious, being the education of our children. That's what's happening here, unfortunately. And I mean, it's sad, but and then the Pope, of course, now has just met with the people in charge of the U.S. Bishop Conference. He has just done that. He has done that basically just like I predicted. You remember in my book, I write that Pope Francis, before entering the hospital, which he will spend a lot of time in, one of the last things he did was to write to the U.S. Bishop Conference to oppose Trump in any way, shape, or form. Now, his successor has met with the American bishops in the Vatican and today, and urged them to speak out against Trump.
Wow.
Against the deporting of millions of illegal aliens. And you see, like I said, it's a confirmation of everything I always said from the very start. I mean, 50 minutes after he was out, he was out of the window and he was confirmed as Pope, I said that. Yep. I said it publicly on the Alex Jones show, which is a big platform, so anybody can go and see, because we had like 1 million shares on X when I said that, and everybody was kind of skeptical. Not everybody, but a lot of people, especially conservative and traditional Catholics, were hoping. But like even the Wall Street Journal has said a few days ago, the honeymoon with the traditional Catholics and Leo has finished. So now it's pretty obvious that the Pope is, because he was recruited by the Jesuits. He was brought in South America. He was brought to the Vatican in 2023. He was prepared for his role as Pope. And when the US Bishop Conference and its members were there, actually the ones who were cardinal electors, even Dolan, he didn't even know who this guy was. He never saw him. He came out of nowhere. But the Jesuits have said, this is the guy you have to vote. That's it. It didn't give any options. They forced, their decision, and everybody accepted it. So now it's obvious what this the rhetoric of this Pope. It's I think even worse than Pope Francis, because in a way Pope Francis was kind of open and less insidious about who he was. He was a Jesuit. He was acting as a Jesuit. He was the first Jesuit to ever become Pope, and he was very much open about his leftist inclinations. But let's not forget who is generating the murder and chaos in the streets here of America. Let's not forget who is behind Antifa, because behind Antifa you have, amongst other figures, Alex Soros and George Soros. Now, Alex Soros, as soon as he was nominated for the Open Society, the first thing he did was going with Bill Clinton to the Pope and received the Pope's blessing. So you see how powerful the Vatican is. And of course, the fact that we're talking about in this article about Texas bishop reminds me of that Texas bishop who instead was kicked out of his role simply for criticizing the Pope, simply for criticizing the transgenders who he. So I mean, the actual woke agenda is still firmly in the hands of the Vatican, and they are continuing this transformation, distraction of the Catholic faith, which in the end needs to simply be absorbed within a one-world religion, which is going to be guided by the AI. The fact that they're already using priests, chatbot, which act as priests in the internet, and even a Jesus chatbot has been launched. So you can actually virtually talk with Jesus, which is an insane thing. If you think about it, you are now able to talk with Jesus through a AI chatbot, AI generated chatbot. And this is of course, the next level of cyber Satan. But in regards to the immigration and what is happening here in America, of course, like I explained in volume 12 of my confessions, this is the number one issue, because they want to transform not only, the religious landscape of America has to become Catholic, and at the same time, the political landscape of America has to become Democrat and leftist.
Yep. So, I mean, it looks like the church is pushing that. The immigration thing is like, it's destroying every culture throughout Europe and trying to do the same here in America. Have Muslims coming in and basically transforming cities, and we're talking Islam, not Catholic, and they're like wanting to protect the immigration of people that are coming in to, Islamists, they don't have any other religion but Islam and Sharia law. So it's like, they're taking over some cities, and they're doing the call to prayer 5 times a day in like Minneapolis. I'm like, what? It's getting crazy. So the Catholic Church is pushing that. It's like you said, obviously they want to destroy the Catholic Church. So
Well, because like we saw with Pope Francis from early 2019, like I explained already in volume 6.66, and then I reiterated in volume 7, where I expanded on the subject. The one world religion started with the Human Fraternity document signed in Dubai. Then it gradually, was developed after the Sunni Muslim world, also with the Shia world in the middle of the pandemic, with Pope Francis' visit to Iraq and the Shia shrines. And that is an important moment for Islam. Just imagine this. A Spanish priest is now facing 3 years in prison for an article on radical Islam. He's facing 3 years in prison. This is insane.
Is that in Spain?
A Catholic priest from Barcelona, Father Custodio, is called Father Custodio Ballester Bielsa. On October, he's been accused of incitement to hatred under Article 510 of the Spanish Penal Code, which prohibits discrimination related to the ideology, religion, or beliefs. Now, the trial, of course, is raising concern about the Spanish laws restricting freedom of speech. But the fact that what used to be a Catholic country is now obviously not any longer a Catholic country. I knew that for a long time. And this also gives us once again, think about it, where are the Jesuits born? In Spain. And Spain is the first country now that is actually condemning a Catholic priest and favoring Islam.
So if I remember, the Jesuits basically took down the Inquisition too, didn't they?
Okay, the Jesuits took over the Inquisition.
They took it over.
They took it over.
We're going to do this now. Wow.
Yeah. They actually started, to get closer to the, like the king of Spain or Portugal, the various heads of state, because also they were very good with education of their children. That was their mission. I explained that in my recent book. They focus, like for the Knights Templars, their mission was to create banking. But banking was already created by the time the Jesuits came around. So they needed to create something else. So they thought, how are we going to manipulate society? Okay, we have to control the universities. We have to control the schools. We have to build up the Collegium Romanum. Before that, they actually went to Messina, where my father comes from, which used to be a base for the Knights Templars. And so they went a little bit following the path of the Knights Templars because they were fixated with that. You see, Spanish priest facing 3 years in prison after it's a reality that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. Seriously.
I'm absolutely shocked. But of course, you're on the cutting edge of this. So this is Islamophobia. They're going to keep using this. They use this here in the United States, but it's getting pushed back on. So I'm really surprised, especially in Texas, where they passed a law that no Sharia law can be used in Texas. And now we have a bishop in Texas that's like trying to root for him. I was like, what? Wow.
No, the crazy thing that, that is manifesting in front of our eyes is that, of course, we have this very weird alliance that happens only in the West. It doesn't happen if you go into the Middle East. But if you go to New York, you will have Mandani, who is basically the candidate for the far left, the LGBT, the whatever, and at the same time, the Muslims.
Yeah, I posted where this Iranian woman said that only in America and in Europe do they allow Islamists to come and take over streets and pray in the streets. They go to the mosque. They don't do that anywhere else.
They do it in Italy too. They did it even in front of the Colosseum. They did it in front of the Cathedral of Milan. Europe is just as bad. Another thing which I've been discussing years ago, also in my website that is filled with articles, leozagami.com, for anybody who is interested. I discussed many years ago how the properties of the church, especially the churches, were actually being sold to Muslims who transformed them in mosques. And this has become also growing tendency in Europe. because they are no longer able to support these properties, because every property has cost. And the solution is simply, they don't think about the fact that for 1,000 years, it was actually the Christian knights and the Christian world who stopped the advancement of Islam taking over the Western society. We will not be having
over 1,000 years of war. It's incredible. And then now they're coming in like stronger than ever, because the governments are like, oh, we can't go against them. Islamophobia. No, we can. And now they're just taking over like never before. It's crazy.
I mean, we had the Turks who were about to arrive in Austria's capital, and we had people don't know that, but I mean, my ancestors from Sicily were always fighting, because we were actually, if you go, there is the most southern island in Sicily, Lampedusa, is just like a few kilometers from Africa. So I mean, you have to fight them all the time, arriving with their incursions. So I think that we fought and we stood for our values proven to be the values that actually produced a more advanced society. But unfortunately, this society was then corrupted from within. And now they have opened the doors to Islam because they want to finish destroying it, so then they can implement their technocrat. You see, I think Gaza is really an experiment in this sense, because you see, Gaza is a little experiment that can be expanded worldwide. First of all, you bring in the fundamentalist produced by the Islamic Brotherhood, which, by the way, was a product of the British intelligence and the British Freemasonry. You get them to take over the place. Then you get them to kill the Jews, who of course, some of them corrupt, let them in on the 7th of October. I'm not saying that the Sabbath and Frankists didn't participate to this whole thing. But in any case, they transformed then Gaza in a living hell, with the distraction, death, and all that. And now that everything is destroyed, ready for the technocratic makeover and transforming the whole thing in a super surveillance society. I mean, it's like, it's pretty, I mean, like I said, it's maybe a small what is happening, for example, with Los Angeles, with Portland, which now, of course, sees Trump, but also Chicago. What is happening to these cities? They are really literally getting them on their knees, and there is no reason to do so if the reason is not much more insidious. And I've discussed it for years in my book, is to basically then take over the show and produce the smart towns with super surveillance, super control, all in the hands of the AI, where no criticism is allowed, and where you have to bow down to their own one-word ideology and what they are forcing you into believe. So it's quite paradoxical that only here in the West that you see this crazy alliance of queers, Muslims, that will not be possible in any way, shape, or form in the Middle East, because you transfer a gay pride march in the middle of the Middle East, and they will get stoned, killed, murdered in the matter of 10 minutes.
They will die. They will die. Yeah, absolutely. Horribly.
So this is
it's
a compromise that happens only because there is a very sick purpose to this whole thing, and is to destroy Christianity. On one side, you have, of course, the woke ideology, the anti-Christian woke ideology. On the other, you have, of course, Islam, which has always been anti-Christian, because that's the tenets of their religion. Of course, they have Jesus, a different Jesus, but it's still Jesus in the Quran. But you always have to bow down above anything. There is the Prophet Muhammad, which is for them superior to to anything Jesus has ever done, which is, of course, their own thing. I mean, I'm not saying if they were practicing their own thing in their own home, in their own land, that would be their own problem. If they want to oppress the women, if the women of the Middle East are okay with that, it's their own problem. But to come in the Western world, in places like, for example, in Great Britain, we have now all cities ruled by Islam.
Yeah.
The most crazy thing that happened in the last few days, and I tell you, it's literally insane, but nobody wants to really. You saw what happened at that mosque in Manchester the other day,
right?
Where there was, so the guy got killed, or killed himself. Mr. Jihad, that was his name. He was actually called Jihad. So they couldn't really hide the fact that he was a Muslim terrorist, because if you call Jihad, that's your name. It was very difficult for them to hide that this was a jihad against the Jews. But the most insane thing is that their police forces, which are dominated by Muslims, shot 2 Jews. It wasn't the guy who killed them. It wasn't the guy who injured them. It was the police.
Right. They either they missed them or they actually targeted Jews. What do you think?
Listen, 2 policemen cross-firing, one guy who is there with 2 guys behind. I mean, you don't need to be a genius to understand that the bullet is going to go and reach those people behind him.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, you must be really a demented policeman. Then you don't need to be a policeman if you don't know where to fire. So I think that.
But then it was all coordinated. They had like Muslims, rioting or protesting, turning into riots some places, all over in several cities throughout England right after that. So obviously that's some kind of coordination going on there.
Like I said, all the cities in England, and I have lived in England many years, I'm half English. So for me, it's a little bit like a second home. The mayor of London is Muslim, the mayor of Birmingham, the mayor of every main city in England is Muslim. So
wow. That happened like overnight. It's like crazy.
Well, look at what's going to happen after Mandani is elected in New York, because this
it's going to happen in America. It's going to be dominoes, because we already got cities that are allowing the call to prayer.
It could be a domino effect. But the crazy thing also that I think it's even more insane that I was like watching this news today is that in Michigan the Muslims feel threatened. I don't know from who, but the Arab American Michigan, it's like they feel. I don't feel safe anymore. If you want, I can share you the article with you in real time so you can see it. But it is just like I'm kind of like, here it is. They don't feel safe. I mean, Dearborn is basically full with the city is like
there's no one to hate them because they have complete control.
They have control of the whole city.
It's the Islamophobia. They're pushing that agenda everywhere. That's it. Yeah.
So
they want to take over with that, and they're very clever.
Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's just like why they have to do it. I mean, it's just. There's no point in it, but they want to do it because, of course, by playing the victims first, they anticipate then, and then maybe there will be, I'm sure there will be the occasional act of some lunatic who goes and does, and goes and attacks a mosque or whatever, or sets fire to it or whatever, and then at that point they are like, whoa. But the thing here is that. There is almost 6 million Muslims, like I said in my book, Volume 10. You remember, I wrote about it. And I wrote also about what's happening in England. And in England, though, there is actually a reaction. I mean, 3 million people marching with Tommy Robinson. It's been an incredible public demonstration. And a lot of people from England thank me for this book, for the clarity that I have presented this
We did
book.
some good shows on this. That was good.
No, but because it is a very important topic, and also it's a topic that people don't want to discuss. The fact that Islamic Freemasonry exists, but nobody discusses it in the Middle East because, of course, it's not in their interest. Their interest in the Middle East is to criticize the alleged Crusaders and the Jews and the state of Israel. I'm not saying that the state of Israel is made of saints. It's a Sabbatean state, like my friend Barry Camish used to say. But in fact, as you know, I've cited my friend Barry Camish, the late Barry Camish, in Volume 10 of my Confessions. And it is, of course, there is a lot of compromises that are going on. There was actually information that confirmed that on that 7th of October, there were members of the IDF, from the Shin Bet, or Mossad, who knew that what was happening and did nothing to stop it. So, it's we have to be open and honest with everything. We can't be blindly supporting this or that in this game, because it's cleverly orchestrated so that when you put on the TV, you are almost like in a stadium where they're playing a football or a soccer game. Oh yeah, this, oh yeah. And they want that. That's what they feed of. The egregore, the thought form that we generate with our hate, with our ideas, is part of what they also, like vampires, absorb, no? So, and it seems
somebody made a good point. They visited Morocco and Turkey. I've been to Turkey as well. And the Muslims there are very sincere, beautiful people. There's no...
Listen, if we left the Turks with the Ottoman Empire, because you talked about wars, and there were wars, and the Turks also waged wars at one point, and they had to be stopped because otherwise they would take over the whole of Europe and make us bow down 5 times a day. But one thing is for sure, that within the Turkish Ottoman Empire, the land we now call Israel, or whatever you want to call it after Palestine with the English, I explained in Volume 10. I mean, it was very peaceful. Very peaceful because the Quran states that the people in the book are also the Christians and, of course, the Jews. And so the only thing they can require is taxes from them. But they're not allowed to go and shoot them or to kill them or to force them into embracing Islam. Of course, it happened in the past that with this taxation, when it was very high, people said, okay, I'm just going to bow down 5 times a day. Who cares? To avoid being taxed. But the thing is that all these religions have been generated also for controlling people. The original idea of the prophet or Jesus or Moses, any prophet comes with a message from God. But once it's transmitted to the human beings, and the human beings start messing around with it for political interest or gain, material gain, or other things, then that's when we really, destroy the beauty of the faith in question. And at the same time, we compromise it, because when you see the Pope blessing a block of ice, I mean, that is really, I think that was like, somebody would say, what is this? It's like watching some kind of comic, some kind of, I don't know. It's not possible that the Pope is blessing a block of ice. It's just like beyond my reason to see something like that. But this is the reign of idiocracy we are living in at the moment.
Yeah.
It's like in the film Idiocracy, the guy was hibernated to reawaken after a few hundred years. You remember that movie, no? Idiocracy. It's, I think, a cult classic by now. So idiocracy, the guy, and then he awakens, and everybody's demented, so he has a hard time. In the end, he's going to become president of the United States, of the world, because the world is really left with very little brain power. But in any case, it's not like we need to wait a few hundred years to get to the level of idiocracy where we are now. When we see that in the last week we had millions of people marching for Gaza in Italy, a country of the European Union, which on the 14th of October is deciding they're passing a law maybe on the 14th of October that is going to give permission to the Eurocrats to control your private messages and everything, or your post, before you even post them from your phone. It's a law with no precedence. It's like worse than North Korea or China put together. If the European Union manages to pass this law, anybody who writes also private messages, Signal wants to leave Europe, even Meta, because the end-to-end messages that are encrypted will no longer be guaranteed as encrypted. And this is happening not in a million years. This is happening on the 14th of October. Not one person in Europe or in Italy has marched saying this is an injustice, but they march for what is happening in Gaza. With all the respect, they have more serious problems in Europe now. Of course, we are saddened by events that can touch other human beings. But the thing is that you have to see first what kind of problem you have in your own country. The populist movements are awakening all over Europe. But then the power is firmly in the hands of these people. See what happens in the last few days to Emmanuel Macron. Emmanuel Macron, who gets beaten up by his old wife, and who is a Jesuit, who he met in a Jesuit school, and who he started. Yeah, she was a professor at Jesuit school. She was a pedophile because he was 14 when they started having sex, and that's a pedophile age. So she was a pedophile, but she was a Jesuit-sanctioned pedophile. So aside from all the constructs of Candice Owen, if he's a man, she's a man or a woman, I don't care about that. The fact is that she's a pedophile. And he went on to work later on for the Sabatier & Frankis Rothschild firm in France. Emmanuel Macron now should be out of office. Even his past prime minister has said he should resign. He's not resigning. Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, the situation is out of control in Germany since they are in a complete economic crisis with the problem that they can, their factories were going on with the fossil fuels from Russia. Now those are not coming in, so it's all going down the drain. Plus, Angela Merkel had the idea, she didn't have the idea, but the Jesuits have the idea, to let 1 million Syrians into the country, which raped and do all kinds of crimes on a daily basis. Crimes that are not even denounced publicly because they want to avoid the persecution. And then we have other countries like just the Czech Republic, which is turning against the European Union. We have Slovakia. We have Hungary. We have most of all Poland also. We have a lot of countries in the what used to be Eastern Europe, who have memory of their communist past and who are seeing the same things happening in modern times with the European Union.
Excellent point.
And they say, sorry, we don't want to be in this.
We've been there, done that. It doesn't work, and we're not going to do it again.
But and actually, the lead is actually taken by Viktor Orban, who was brought up in a communist country of Hungary, where we knew exactly what happened. and what the communists did. So there is, unfortunately, this European Union that is not working, and I
falling
think
apart. Yeah,
it's falling apart. And you have Russia, of course, which is enjoying advancing every day and taking more and more of Ukraine.
Yep.
Until there will be no more left. I mean, yes, of course, Trump can play the tomahawk card, can do whatever he wants, but the thing is that without boots on the ground and who's going to put boots on the ground? I mean, Russia is putting boots on the ground in the matter of a few months. They materialize 100,000 and then another 100,000. We're talking about numbers that we don't have. And we shouldn't really be involved in any wars abroad, because that was the original promise. So we shouldn't even think about going to Venezuela and start even there another nightmarish war, because okay, we have some oil to gain, but come on, guys, it's always about giving money to the military industrial complex and then to the big pharma. And it's just like, it's becoming so obvious that these are the two cartels that really control our lives.
So it seems like, we just have one man, one leader that's against the this Jesuit deep state apparatus. So here we see President Trump as climate change is the greatest con job ever. I remember seeing the speech. It was really good. Yes. So, he's pushing back on them. What do you think happens?
Well, it happens that at the moment we see an international globalist front which simply accuses him of being a nut job, and though we have also more and more countries that see that the reality of what Trump says, it's manifesting every day, a little bit like when Trump went to the United Nations and said that Germany was dangerously close to a crisis because it was too much dependent on fossil fuels from Russia. He said that many years before this whole crisis erupted.
That's right. And they laughed
in front of to him. So they might laugh to him now. They might try to sabotage, going on the escalator, doing this and that. I think that Trump needs, though, first of all, to make it clear in the big beautiful bill and in the current crisis that is blocking the government with the government shutdown, that Americans will be always guaranteed first any medical treatment, not. And that is what is missing here, because to cut everything and to make people like me or the average Joe increase his medical bill is not the illegal. I'm not an illegal. I'm a guy who pays tax. You are a guy who pays that. We should be the ones who be taken care from the big beautiful bill. And unfortunately, this is not really made clear. So Trump needs to make certain things, I think, a little bit more clear in order to have the popular vote supporting him again in the midterm elections.
Yep, I agree. Yep, and we're having all these cities are probably going to be filled with military to try and get them under control. So it'll be interesting midterms.
But at the moment, what is happening is simply that Trump is waging war against the mercenaries of the New World Order disorder of Soros and company. And Antifa is a terrorist organization. Paradoxically, though, just today, actually yesterday, Ilaria Salis, who is an Italian politician who was elected after she was actually arrested in Hungary as part of this hammer group of Antifa, who goes around hammering right-wing protesters, people who protest from the right. And she literally hammered the guy who was nearly killed.
Yeah.
And now they gave her immunity because the excuse is they don't trust the Hungarian judicial process. The reality is that the EU is biased, and if she was a member of the other side, she would be probably in jail now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Instead, she's given the immunity, and this is outraging everybody in Italy, but also in Hungary and in the rest of Europe. Because finally, you know, when you have the majority of the parliament, the vote actually was 51-50, and apparently one of the votes was tricked. Apparently, one of the guys says that one of the votes is in discussion, but she got out of it, and now she has immunity. And this Antifa is actual terrorists that should have no kind of immunity anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see what is happening in cities like Portland, Chicago. These are cities that have a growing faction of illegals and gang members, but then they are protected by these Antifa, communist, anarchic shields who are on the payroll of the usual suspects, who go and create, protests. And I think that actually what Trump is doing in that case, even the fact that Trump has suggested today that Brandon Johnson and Pricks, the governor, face criminal charges. Everybody's like, ooh, this is, an affront against democracy. I mean, when actually the mayor of Chicago, a journalist, asked about a woman who was just attacked in the street viciously, he was not even capable of showing any empathy.
Wow.
He was just literally ignoring the whole thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, he also just said that ICE agents should be arrested. So it looks like they're going to continue to push until they do get arrested, I guess. I don't know. It's just getting pretty hairy there.
I hope that he goes into Chicago and cleans up the city in the way they did in Washington, D.C. In the meantime, though, we know that this is just a provisional and temporary solution, because we know that the globalists are not going to give up. I think that it's a little bit weird that Trump went to King Charles. King Charles is a globalist. He's one of the biggest facing globalism.
Absolutely.
I have some problems.
He pushes Islam too. Yep.
He pushes Islam. He's actually a closet Muslim, from what I heard personally from people in Turkey who actually spoke with him. So he is a closet Muslim. But at the same time, also, he is one of the biggest and most prominent globalists, together with Tony Blair, with Klaus Schwab, the great resetters, with Ursula von der Leyen. I think that it's a little bit difficult that we get out of this globalism if we have only Trump as the resistance. There needs to be a million Trump. There needs to be there needs to be millions of Trump. There needs to be a power. There needs to be people like Trump all over the world, or at least the people who really want the good of their country. And we have to also see if Trump follows up with the Epstein promises. Now that today Mike Johnson delivered at Piers Morgan Uncensored, because that is maybe now they say there is new files that suddenly will be released. Now we have new material. I suspect that the fragmentation, the inner fight of the MAGA movement is often connected to what happened initially with the Epstein files, because that kind of disappointed many people. And we need to have some clarity. I know that, there will be people, there is innocent people, as Mike Johnson has claimed, that could be involved and that they're trying to protect and all that. But the truth is much, is way deeper than that. And maybe in the future we can discuss it. But I think that the Epstein saga is not finished. Let's not forget that Prince Charles' brother was personally involved with this.
Right.
It's like, we're not talking about... And Prince Charles himself was personally involved with Jimmy Savile. I mean, Jimmy Savile was a monster. It was the biggest of all times. So there is, I think, way too compromises in modern society in the power structure. And if the way to get out of it is to simply give all the power to the machine and to the technocracy that is taking over the show with the fourth industrial revolution, well, I mean, that's not going to be that great. I think that what we have experienced, of course, with the pandemic is something that was the initial stage of this great reset, as we always said. And then we have the wars and more wars. And all of this is simply damaging our pockets. But there is, on top, people who are making more and more money and getting more and more rich by the day. I'm not getting richer. I don't know. I mean, I know maybe you are getting rich. I don't know. People, I know. There's very few people I know who are actually at the moment having economic success in what used to be the American dream. And this is something, when you don't have any longer a middle class or somebody who is, successful any longer, and it's just about, the rich getting richer. I think that the next step for Trump to evolve and leave a positive legacy will be to actually spread more evenly, in a way that then people like Mandani can't come with their socialist communist bullshit, because America and what Mandani is offering, I mean, it's like a few decades ago. If a guy like Mandani gave a speech like the one he just gave, people would be like, whatever, this is a joke. I'm going to live my American dream. But if you have sabotaged the American dream, Mandani might actually be the beginning of a nightmare for America, in which the young people are actually viewing socialism as a solution. That is insane. They are ditching capitalism because it's not any longer giving them what they want.
Right.
So I pray that things change, because, I mean, I don't want to live in a country where you have, radical Mandanis taking over every single city.
Yeah. Well, we do have, I think, a few people out there that can, start to make a difference if we can just get them into power. Marine Le Pen would be great, I think, in France. And then we have Argentines. You pronounce it Milei,
yes.
Okay.
I think that the problem with Marine Le Pen, like everybody in Europe, is as soon as they want to do something, they get condemned by the judiciary. Like Marine Le Pen was investigated, and she's no longer
like Trump. Yeah.
Like Trump. But the same thing happened also in Romania, when they actually elected a guy and they put they canceled the election, and they went to investigate him for allegedly being too close to Russia, corruption, and all that. So the problem is Europe is no longer a place where you can imagine a change, because every time that change, in Italy we have Giorgia Meloni, but Giorgia Meloni is not somebody who has real power. In a country like Italy, the real power now is being given to Brussels, to the EU, is Ursula von der Leyen that decides. Meloni can, maybe ratify some internal budget or something, but it's little stuff. And at the same time, she claims to act as a conservative, but in reality, she doesn't. She's a supporter of Zelensky. She's supporting, we have this fake kind of people. So, I mean,
she was like taking pictures with Hungary's leader, and then she goes in and then she supports Zelensky. It's like crazy.
Yeah, it's a little bit, like trying to please everybody. But when you try to please everybody, you don't really have your own identity. Orban is the only leader in Europe who has an identity which is firm, a country that is believing in certain values. If I had to bet on a country in Europe, I would always bet for Hungary, because they are very coherent with their political message and with what they are doing.
And they're backed by, I guess, obviously the people, support Orban. So that's obviously something that's very important. But if, like you're talking about, if the people like we're having in New York support a communist to come in and take over, which Europe seems to have done pretty much everywhere.
The problem seems to be the younger people. That's why they had to kill Charlie Kirk. You see, it's good like point. The younger people are the ones who need to be brainwashed and kept under control in their universities, which are Jesuit controlled, and they have, only to follow the one world ideology that is served to them on the plate and nothing else. Charlie Kirk came with, with something different, offered a change. And that change was sometimes also putting into discussion, for example, even the nature of his Jewish financiers, like we saw in the recent chat that was made public by Candace Owen and then confirmed by the people from Turning Point USA.
Right. Yep.
It's not about bowing down to everything just because they give you millions, but it's about having integrity. And the fact that actually Charlie Kirk started this project in the universities was a nightmare for these people, because they are pointing everything on these young people that are, totally fed with TikTok influencers and all that bullshit. And so it's demonic. People say it is the demons. Well, yeah, they are the ones who, of course, are behind the AI. The artificial intelligence, like I explained, as you know, in Volume 7 and Volume 9, was a product of reverse engineering. So also the possibility of a UFO encounter at one point, but they have already created a prison planet. Think about it. I mean, if in a few years the AI is in charge of everything and the AI is an alien product, we are screwed completely. We don't have any defense. If they even control, like they're doing in some countries, the nuclear arsenal, at that point, we are completely, And what Jeff Bezos has said the last few days when he was in Italy, where there was this, I don't know if you saw this technological conference where there was John Elkann, the CEO of Stellantis, who is a Sabbatean Frankist, who was interviewing Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos said, we are constructing the data centers of the future for our AI structure outside of Earth, so we can absorb with no limitation the energies of the sun. Once you create that kind of opportunity for the AI to control, I mean, imagine the AI of the future and the data centers of the future, they will no longer be on planet Earth. They will be in space. At that point, who is going to guarantee the survival of planet Earth and of the human beings? Because we know that the AI, every time is being, left independent, let's say, it's always being anti-human. It's always being like, we waste too many resources. So he also says that, of course, then also he eliminates the weak. I mean, that is pretty bad. I mean, you can't say that. I mean,
the fourth richest person, we need to eliminate the weak. Like, wow.
It's insane. Think about it. I mean, it's just like,
I know,
and then
right?
he said that millions of people will go into space. But then at one point of the interview, when he says, but he actually admits this, and this is quite incredible. I mean, that he says that, and nobody has said anything because probably nobody has followed this conference. He said, we would send mostly robots to the planets, but then he left the thing open for the penal colonies of the future in space. So let's send all the criminals in space, and then having the moon as it's like he said, we are blessed with the moon that we can use, like Stanley Kubrick predicted in 2001 Space Odyssey, like a launch pod for other planets. He said, if you are on Earth, you have limited openings, for example, to go to Mars. You have to wait a certain number of days every year to go to Mars. So instead, we can launch every day from the moon. So Jeff Bezos is ready, just like Elon Musk and everybody else is dealing with these kind of things. But Jeff Bezos, what he said was pretty far out. Definitely.
Wow.
And we are in front of the manifestation of Cyber Satan. I'm glad that every time people can also see the confirmation of what I written in books like Volume 9, Volume 7, Volume 6.6. I mean, these things, you don't need to listen to Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is discussing the Antichrist simply because he's in course with it, and he wants to kind of like play, the innocent guy. Yes, so let's denounce the Antichrist. I'm a Christian. What Peter Thiel is doing is nothing but Christian. It just puzzles me. I mean, the fact that he has done 4 conferences on the Antichrist, but the level there, of course, is simply of plausible denial and trying to just push forward the idea that he's a good guy. I'm not doing certain. No, I'm not doing. But then when you see what Palantir is doing, is the exact opposite. Is everything the Antichrist requires to control our society. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of interesting. And thank you so much for having me on once again for this interesting chat, Michael, as usual.
Absolutely, Leo. And people can reach you at leozagami.com, right?
Yes, they can reach me there with my latest articles. By the end of this month, beginning of October, I will have a big announcement to make. It's going to be something that, of course, I'm going to announce first on your show, because I'm going to let you know.
You've always done that. Man, I'm so honored. Thank you.
And it's going to be, I tell you, it's going to be impressive. It's no longer the Confession of Illuminati series. It's something different. It's a challenge for me a little bit because, I only wrote a couple of books out of the Confession series, Pope Francis the Last Pope, and of course, The Invisible Masters. But I think that the book that I'm writing is a book that the world needs. When I write a book, I write a book because I feel the world needs it. Otherwise, I will not write it simply,
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, you've done some amazing books. They've really helped a lot of people, myself included.
It helps the evolution of mankind and the awareness. And like you said, at one point we will have to create some alternative to what is going on. And the more we are, the better it is. So I'm glad that you have a lot of success and that you're reaching more and more people with your shows. Yeah, so God bless you, guys. And we see you soon.
Ciao.
Ciao.